All right, we should be recording. Hi, I am Shannon Tibbetts, and
Yes.
I have with me Lauri Maynard. We are co-founders of the Creative Compass Collaborative, and we're here today to talk about the emotions that we all experience and the journey of them, and how to grow through those emotions. Um, so I thought I'd start a little bit just talking about right now, the time that we're in. Um, there's so many emotions that are kind of boiling up with everyone because we've been in this quarantine state for quite a bit. Um, so I wanted to kind of start there because I think I've had many conversations with people recently where they've expressed some things and they're not really um, realizing or allowing themselves to kind of be sad and be in this grieving process, which I think is a little bit of what everyone is going through right now. So I thought maybe we'd start there and just kind of talk about the change and what we might be seeing and some things we maybe could do about that.
Right. I agree. It is a grieving process. In the beginning, when this first happened back in March, I think people were still kind of in shock at it all. It seemed people were doing a lot of action things and mobilizing and just kind of reeling for that first few weeks. And then it started settling into deeper things like, people are getting frustrated and I guess more anxious financially as it was stretching out longer than we thought. So we were originally told a couple weeks, and it certainly hasn't been that. And now we're kind of settled into more of a routine of things, and we're still not sure when this is going to end. So I think the reality of it is settling in a little bit deeper. And it really does follow those stages of grief, which is denial. I really don't like that word because it implies that we're consciously denying something, but really it's just getting used to the idea of something drastically different and painful even. So we've gotten past some of that and we're settling into the reality, and that's where the sad comes up. It's like, how do I move from here? Plus all the anxiety and the stuff that you still have, they're all mixed in there. It's not just one emotion at one time. But I can just see the stages of the people that I've been working with and myself. And now we're having to kind of rebuild a lifestyle that matches this new reality that we're in. And it's still hard. I don't know. I'm not thrilled. Not every day.
No, we've been talking a lot about the fact that neither one of us have been thrilled lately. It's been a lot of emotional, and I think it's important to point out too that you hear people talk a lot about the stages of grief and the stages of this and the stages of that, and I think it's important to point out that it's not a straight line. It's not a specific step. You can roll in and out of different emotions, different quote unquote stages of it. I think they in my opinion anyway, they use that terminology because we need a little bit of order in the chaos. And I think that's and there's a lot of obviously psychology behind the different actions and the different stages and why and where where things happen and all of that. I don't mean to minimize it, but I just want to be kind of put people at ease. Like, it's okay to be wherever you are. There isn't a determined path in this, and it is a grieving process because you're grieving loss, right? And when you're grieving, you're grieving a loss of something. It's if it's a person, it's love, right? Grief is love, and that can also apply to things in your life. Things that you love to do in your life are not happening anymore. I had a trip that was planned. I was going to a different country, and obviously that was canceled, and so there's the loss of that enjoyment, that travel, that excitement, that part of my life that I had to shut down. Travel is a big part of what I do. So it's grieving experiences too. That's a big part of this. And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be sitting on your couch and, binge watching, Netflix and doing those kind of things, but it's also okay not to be. It's okay to be out and, and pushing through it and, outside in your yard and doing whatever. I say out, I know nobody's supposed to really be out right now, but, unless you're on the front lines of this, and thank you for that if you are. So yeah, so we're all kind of at different stages of it, but we're all in it together, right? So I've kind of been thinking about that whole process, and how do we do that? How do we support each other by allowing each other to be in whatever state we're in, which could be completely different from where we are? And I thought I'd kind of use us as an example a little bit and kind of talk through it, because we've both been kind of up and down as we're trying to go through and get work done and do different things. And I may have a day where I'm just like, okay, I'm in front of the television today. It's just me and Ozark, which is now done, which I'm now sad about. And then there's another day where I'm just like raring to go, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just need some time today. And in doing that, we all have different processes that we do, where we journal and we do stuff like that. So I thought maybe we kind of take a minute and talk about, I guess, the respecting each other in whatever stages we're at, and some tools that we can give to people where they can, kind of work through things if they want to work through to grow through.
Right. Yeah, we are at very different stages. And another piece that's coming up underneath the grief aspect is, if there's any relationship dynamics or family dynamics, now that we're all quarantined, those things are getting ramped up. So we're dealing with things that are, was maybe subconscious, or things that we were busy enough to be distracted from are now surfacing. So I've had that experience myself. My daughter's been away at college for the last 4 years, and now we're together. So we're just facing each other at different life stages, and it's a little bit tense at times. So on top of all that is just another layer of tension and stress. So we are in different places, and we do have different perspectives on things. So you may be looking at family members that think entirely different than you, and now you have to share the same space. So I think the biggest thing we might offer is to, if you can get a little bit of downtime or space for yourself, even if it's a corner, which is literally my case, a corner where you can kind of be yourself, even if you have to put headphones on, just try to create a little bit of a bubble so you don't lose track of you in the middle of the confinement at home. So not only touching base with yourself, the clearer you can be with you, the better you can be at understanding someone else's position, even if it's very different than yours. Most people just want to be heard. I think if nothing else, you don't even have to agree or fully understand, but if you can just hear the other person's perspective or position and understand that probably everybody, we're sharing the same experience, but we all have slightly different perspectives on that. So to assume that we're going to think alike is probably unrealistic. If you can kind of just be an open listener, I think that's going to save a little bit of tension. And if you don't know what to say to somebody, if you can just acknowledge how they feel, what you feel they're saying, then you're in good shape. You don't have to have an answer. Some people just need to vent, talk, or complain. If they're asking for help, they'll ask you. And if you don't know the answer, then together you can look for it. You don't have to know, but they call that validation. That's mostly what we all want, is to be heard and understood. So if you need to complain, let someone complain, and then maybe you get a turn to complain next time. I know
To be
Shannon
loved.
and I back and forth.
Yeah, to be loved, to be heard, to be understood. That seems like the whole the summation of everything right there. And yes, we do, because we're grieving the loss a little bit of working together all the time, because it's although we still are excuse me, meeting via Zoom, it's not the same. We still obviously have this benefit, and we're grateful for it, but at the same time it's a different dynamic. We would be in the same space and be able to utilize each other's energy and kind of walk through the day and go for lunch or do the things, play with Maisie who's barking in the corner. And so we're both missing that opportunity to do that. And it, even in that, it's the appreciation that comes, I know, from on my end of, just understanding that, hey, this is what's going on in my life right now. So maybe I, maybe we adjust this time for this meeting or whatever. Excuse me. I think we tend to do that less with our family when we're in those closed spaces than we do when we're meeting. And sometimes we get each other in check. I know I call my best friend sometimes and we'll vent something out, and it's just for that. It's just to have another person say, hey, okay, I hear you. This is what's going on. Why don't you try this, and get that. And I recommend that a lot, just be open. I also like to, on that same note, if you're not sure what the other person needs and you need a second, just ask for a second. Say, can you give me a minute? And maybe walk away, give yourself some space, and maybe even write some things down. Use as an opportunity to kind of recenter and think about what they said, and then come back a little bit and say, hey, this is what I was hearing. Am I right? And a lot of times you'll find is not. I know my husband and I have many communication gaps. And I'll say, no, that's not what I meant at all. And he'll do the same thing. But it's important to talk about it. And you can't always get that way if you're not allowing that space. And allowing the space for sadness and anger is important too. I know that's one thing in our household we've had to kind of, him more than me, learn to deal with, because he never knows when I will switch from talking like everything is fine, and then the next minute I'm really down, or crying in the corner or something, because of something that overtook. And I think it's important to allow that, and to allow that space, and understand that other person might be just in a different headspace than you, and all they really need is for somebody to love them, understand them, and hear them in that moment. So yeah, just maybe try to approach it and give yourself a little bit of space, and give them a little bit of space too, if that's what's needed.
Right. And if it's difficult to hear someone because of something going on for you, like Shannon said, you could ask for space then too. Say, I can't hear you right now. Let me take a break and we'll come back. But I always recommend make sure you make a time to come back so that the other person has some reassurance that you're not just trying to ignore them. Doesn't usually go over well to ignore people. And I just want to point out again that feelings are a natural part of our whole biology. We have them for a reason. They're telling us whether we're in alignment with something that's going well and good to keep doing, or if it's just something that's way off. So no matter what feeling you have, it is your body talking to you, and it needs to be paid attention to. So don't minimize yourself or feel silly because you're crying over some kind of, I'll speak for myself, grocery items that I cannot find at the store. The little emotional eating comforts that I had at one time, I can't always get at now. So it's okay to cry over that stuff, even though it seems silly on the bigger scale of things. It's your body telling you that things are out of balance, and it's okay. But that sure is on top. It doesn't have to be a big dramatic trigger. If you're having a feeling, have it. It's really okay.
That's absolutely right. Like just acknowledging that something is going on, and knowing, if you tense up, and if you notice how your body reacts to things, like Lauri was saying, if you notice how that's happening, you can kind of start paying attention to even what's causing that to happen sometimes, and then how you might visibly react to that. Because if you're getting tense, sometimes that turns into an explosion because you're going this way. Whereas if you're starting to do this and you can recognize, okay, I'm starting to do this, and maybe you go to a window and you look outside for a minute and you take that pause. The emotion is there for a reason. It's to give you something. The tears are there for a reason. It's a release. It's water. It's cleansing. It's people used to apologize to me if they made me cry because they mentioned Zach or whatever, and like they reminded me of it. And that's not how it works. You're crying because of love, or you're crying because, in your case, you love this food and you can't have it right now. It's still a loss of love, right? You're like, I can't have this thing. So it's you're seemingly overreacting, because that's the, the diatribe that's been passed down for generations and generations, that you're overreacting about something. And that's that, all of those beliefs, those limiting beliefs that we have, that we need to kind of release. And it's important for people to understand that when you're feeling something, you're feeling something, and that's okay. Like there's so much out in the world right now where, where people are hiding how they're feeling, because they're afraid that somebody's going to know that this is going on, or I'm sad about this, or the depression, or whatever that particular thing might be in their life. It's okay for these things to be out there and for us to talk about it. It's important to talk about it. Mental health and mental stability is important, and we don't get there by walking away from it. And so that's where taking that time and acknowledging that emotion, and also kind of diving into it a little bit. Like it might be a passing thing, but it might not be. If you're if shopping, every time you went shopping, it's something that's bringing you down, then it's time to start looking at, okay, what is it about this that's really upsetting me so much? And having that conversation, with someone about it, joking about it, doing what you need to do, to feel better is okay, but you also kind of need to get to the root of where all this is coming from. So you can't necessarily get there in one step. Sometimes it's a lot of steps that it takes to get there, but understanding that where you are is okay is, I think, the first step, whatever it is that you're feeling. And there's a difference between feelings and actions. I have this conversation in our house a lot, especially with a 9-year-old, as she's learning to, get through all of this as well, because it's how you act is a decision you're making, right? Crying is not how you act towards something. Crying is a reaction that you're having to an emotion. The emotion isn't bad. Now, if you're crying and then you start screaming at everyone, and then you're, and going to the next thing, then maybe it's, okay, it's time out, go into your own room, scream at the ceiling, whatever. If it turns into where it's, it's not kindness, then that's where you want to take a step back and say, hey, maybe I need to talk to somebody and kind of get a hold of this and see where it's going, which is, I think, a good place for you to jump in. And how do people know when they get to that point? Like, where is it from, I'm just having this emotion, to, okay, this is something deeper, and maybe I need to kind of dive into this with somebody.
Yeah. With this kind of thing, we're looking for patterns. Once in a while to have an emotional outburst like that doesn't necessarily have to be a concern. But if it gets repeated, we're staying in an emotion too long to feel good about it, that's when it's good to maybe get some help. We all have outbursts sometimes. If those outbursts are chronically mean towards other people, that's something to look at. Our actions are something we have to own and take responsibility for. It's a personal choice. Sometimes you can catch it yourself if you're having the feeling and it's on long enough for you to say, okay, this doesn't feel right. I think I need some support here. That's one way to get there. You might also listen to people, sometimes have a better sense of how we're acting and reacting than we do, because we feel it as a feeling, but we don't always see what we look like when we're acting that out. I think taking a little self-inventory and paying attention to what other people have to say, that doesn't, but if it's impacting them in an angry or aggressive way, that's probably your experience too. So if it's chronic, and we're in a tight situation with this whole quarantine thing. So sometimes underneath all these actions and reactions and emotion is a feeling that we're not in control. And we're all in a situation that we cannot control. So that's one of the big, common root causes to some of these things. I think it's good to recognize there are things that we can't control. So that's a question I always ask myself whenever I'm facing something. I have to say, okay, what about this situation, or what about this feeling that I'm experiencing do I have control over? And that's going to narrow down your brain's things you can control, you can create a plan for and do something about. The things that you cannot control, now you got to learn how to cope with them. So it just teaches your brain there's something to do when you're upset, and then hopefully over time you can teach your brain how to assess the situation and not assume the worst and run down an emotional track that kind of gets you down or in trouble. If that makes sense.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Just the control factor, and because there are a lot of things that you don't have control of, but you can control how things happen in the situation. So, for example, we don't have control over the fact that we can't go anywhere right now. We're being asked to stay in our homes. We don't have any control over the fact that maybe someone is laid off from their job and there's less income coming in. We don't have a control over the space that we're living in right now, right? So there's things like that. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, well, this is our reality, but what do we have control over? And I think it's really important to focus on the what do we have control over. So in one of the tools that I use for this, I do it mentally. Sometimes I'll jot it down, but and I've been doing it for so long that it's usually just a mental exercise for me. But I would recommend making a list of all the things that you do have control over. And if it's something that you have control over and maybe it's not the way you want it, then I would subdivide that into, well, what possible changes could you make to that? So if you're home and maybe your home is not your favorite place to be, and you miss your job because that was a space that you really enjoyed, and now you're home. Well, what is in your home that you have control over? Well, you have control over, maybe what color paint is on your walls. Maybe you have control over what furniture is in there, where it's positioned. Maybe you have a backyard, you have control over that and what could go out there. Maybe you have control over, moving things around in your house and completely changing up the rooms, and whatever the circumstances are, just kind of write them down. And just, I find focusing on what you can do is an empowerment all in and of itself. And so it takes you out of that space of feeling less like you don't have control of anything into more of the what can I do. It brings you back to that little kid who doesn't know the word no.
Yeah.
And starts pushing and asking questions and saying, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? Turn into that person.
Right. I think it's important to own your space in your home, even if it's a very small space. It could be just a surface on a counter or a corner. I think it's good to have a space that is yours that you can go to. It could just be a chair, whatever you're working with. And you may not be able to renovate a space or make big changes in your space. That's something that's not pleasant. I know when my kids were little and things were tough in my marriage, we didn't even have a lot of money, so it wasn't even very decorated. But I put one thing in each room that just reminded me of myself. So sometimes it was just a stone I found on the beach. Sometimes it was a photo. But each room had some little something in there that I could focus on if everything else was going bad. Give yourself those little reminders. Music helped me a lot too. I would put on like classical music, and even if the kids were, it just with music going on. What you're going to find is when you start to break down what can I control and what I can't control, the only thing you're going to really have the most control over is you. Like, what are you choosing to do in this moment? What are you going to choose to focus on or react to? You can control all of those at any given time. Nobody can take away that. Sometimes you can control the people in it and the things and the situation. So do what you can. If you can't, you can always rely on yourself to add some little piece to your situation. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think we all have the illusion of control anyway.
Yeah. We want it.
Yeah, we want it. Yeah. That's been a lifelong battle for me. I was very type A personality for a really long time, and it's still in there a little bit, a lot of it, I guess, but something that I kind of work on all the time, because being able to let things go and adapt and just kind of go with the flow is an extremely important thing, I think, when you're in a situation that you can't control. Being able to adjust, and I think that there's just so much emotion in the world right now in general. That's kind of adding to everybody's state of mind and state of being, and so people are getting antsy. They want to get out. They um, maybe don't see why we need to be in this quarantine any longer, and they're wanting to go outside, and they're wanting to do the things, and and then you have a whole bunch of people who are just really enjoying the fact that they've got a bunch of downtime now, and they're able to get a lot of things done, and so it's a really interesting mix of what's going on in the world right now. But I think it's important to just acknowledge wherever you are is okay. And if you're feeling not okay, you have resources. And I mean, obviously you can come to us, but you have resources all over to help that. And I would encourage everybody to find a list of things. I don't know, maybe like 5 things that are just go-to moves for you. So like for me, going out into nature is a go-to move for me. If I'm feeling really wonky, and I need just to reset my emotions or my brain or whatever for that little bit, sometimes it's just a matter of walking outside. Like I just walk outside and feel the sun on me, and just listen to what's going on out there or whatever. But so being in nature is one for me. Make a list of like 5 things. Stop and really think about 5 things that actually bring you to a place of recentering. So for me, nature is grounding. It's that space where I can go outside and I'm now connected to the earth, and I'm kind of recentering, finding some stability, kind of breathing through it, that kind of thing. But art is another one of my places that I go. And, for me, that's a completely different experience. I mean, I guess sometimes I get grounded out of it, but it's mostly just takes me, to wherever I need to go. But make your list of 5 things and have that accessible so that it's not something that you have to really think about. And if you're in a space where you are just feeling way out, go do one of those things. It could be sitting on the couch and watching Netflix. It could be coloring. It could be, cooking. It could be whatever. But just know what your 5 things are and utilize them. And I think if you start putting that into practice on a daily basis where you're feeling a little bit off, and you intentionally allow yourself to experience something that is going to bring you some joy or some centering, then that's a way to step towards joy. And that's really what it's all about, right? Is for us to actually just kind of go through all this messiness that we have to do in life, and just try to have as much enjoyment as we can and keep moving towards joy, right? So I would suggest finding your 5 things, and start there. Laurie, did you have anything?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on what you just said about being intentional about it. Because we rely on our thoughts or our emotions, or even our intuition to kind of tell us what we like to do or not like to do. Right now, if you're in a place of heightened emotion because of the situation, that might not be your best gauge all the time as to what the best thing to do is. So I'm really sad. The opposite thing of how I feel in order to feel better. My sad is going to slow my body down. It's going to say, no, you just want to sit on the couch all day. But I deep down know my logic will tell me, get
You just cut out on me there.
Oh.
You said your sad would tell you to slow down, but your logic would tell you.
Okay, yes. So my logic would tell me if I do one of those 5 things, I'm gonna feel better, even though I might not feel like doing it at that moment because sometimes do the opposite of how you feel because of what you know about yourself. So you have your logic to pull from, you have your emotions also giving you signals, and you have your spirit, which is that intuitive side of you talking to you all the time. If your emotions are highly stressed, highly sad, then you're going to have to go with the other two to figure out what's the best thing to do. Putting my own butt into gear and getting up and doing something. Sometimes I just know I need the rest, and a Netflix day is perfectly fine. You just have to listen to what your whole body is saying. Your emotions being one of the pieces of the puzzle, but you got 2 others to rely on if those aren't clear to you or they're not telling you something that makes sense. So
You take it back to that time when you didn't want to go somewhere. Your friend dragged you along and said, "No, come on, it'll be fun." And then you get there and you're like, "I'm so glad you brought me on this adventure," or whatever. It's that. It's you have to find your own things that are gonna pull you on that adventure.
right.
Yeah.
And even there, you can find things that engage your mind, things that kind of wake up your body, or things that tap into your spirit, which is or spiritual, but it could also be that belly laugh joy too. So whenever we're joyful, we're tapping into our spiritual side. So you've got those 3 areas to look from to find those 5 things. And if you're not sure, try one. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Just do something. If you know you're not feeling well, it's not going to change without some kind of something. So
No, absolutely. And that's a big part of what we do in our Living in Charge group is in our program as well, is to provide tools so that you can see these things, and to just do fun things that actually bring the joy out, because sometimes it's not science. Sometimes it's literally just being a kid and playing and having fun. Sure, there's science behind it and all of that, but sometimes it's just about being a kid. So yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing in this whole growing through emotion, that was the most difficult for me, was allowing myself to slow down enough to pause. And so that's what I'm trying to listen to now. And that's what I'm doing, is allowing the downtime to come and allowing the slowness to kind of take over, choosing what I am putting my time and my intentions into, and really just kind of being quiet and listening, which if anyone out there is type A, you know that is not a normal way of living for a type A personality. We're just kind of on the go, doing the things, having the fun. And I have my mindful moments in the morning and at night, but it's structured almost. So for me, it's just allowing.
right, right. And our emotions are part of how we grow. So even though you may not be in a good place, you're still growing. Everything's still working. It just may not feel like that at the time, but they're signals. And so your body's responding to them, even if you're not fully conscious of them. There is movement. So don't think you're stuck. No one's really stuck. It's just not possible. We're always evolving.
Absolutely. I'm good. Do you have anything else you want to add, or?
No, other than to just, if you're in a place that you need some help, please ask. We have our Bring Joy Forward Facebook group in there. There's just suggestions of things that you can do. I've been doing a meditation through that, feeling much better. So you can try things in the comfort of your own home without having to be in front of other people. So just explore.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're here for you. Part of why we're collaborating is because we believe, the more of us together going forward, the better we're going to be. So don't be afraid to reach out, comment, send us a private message if that's your jam, or pop in the group and say hi. We'd love to hear from you. But thanks so much for being with us today.
Absolutely.